It is Stranger Oddities. Thank you for coming in and hanging out with me. It is Halloween night. Those of you that are tuned in right here to the show, Halloween night. And yes, Count Dracula has brought his favorite beverage, blood. The gloriousness of black and white. Because everything looks awesome in black and white. When they started making movies early on in black and white, and I think the most notorious thing in black and white done would be Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Because think about that movie and what it is. That was done in the 60s. He chose to do it in black and white, even though color was very available. He chose to do it in black and white to tone down the violence aspect of it. Now, cool thing about that is what was used for blood, for say, in the movie Psycho was none other than glorious chocolate syrup. Yes, quite tasty. What a great choice. I wonder on set how many people just consumed the makeup. But yes, he used Bosco's chocolate syrup for the Psycho. That was the blood. And the way it's explained, even so, the way the guy says the density and blood, it's almost like he didn't really want to talk about it in the later interviews and whatnot. But I always thought that was very interesting. Shooting back to the Universal horror would be like Dracula with Bela Lugosi. That was really to see that. Remember when Ringsfield, I think is his name, he cuts himself on the paper or the paper clip, and he sees the blood on his finger. Even looking back then, there was blood in theatrical film like that. Of course, nothing like which we get later on, where you have like classics like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and whatnot. So, but anyway, again, thank you for everybody that has decided to spend their Halloween night right here on the channel, the Stranger Oddities show and everything. So, we've got some movies to talk about and everything, and most of the ones that we got here are ones that are pretty fairly known, but we got some weird ones in there. Weird ones that you may not even know of, right? I grew up with VHS. That was my upbringing. I was a VHS guy, kid, and I had all kinds of videotapes, and boy, did I regret getting rid of those. I tell you, if I could go back and snag them back up again, I would. I still purchase them. Like I purchased this is an original copy of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on VHS, the media film. It's the all original. It's even got the tan colored dust cover and everything. It's got the 50-cent charge, rewind fee, and the old artwork and everything. That is actually what I remember with my father going and renting that from the video store in town and watching it for the very first time. Really cool stuff. Another one here up on the list is a weird one. It's called Demented. She has lost everything: hope, control, and her mind. This one here, basically, I'll go ahead and read the back of it. Why not? After surviving a brutal and devastating assault, Linda Rogers is institutionalized in order to deal with her intense trauma. And by the time she is finally released, her attackers have been brought to justice and imprisoned, but her psychological scars remain. Okay, this is basically she was sexually assaulted, and then she goes bonkers, and then she starts killing everybody. I originally saw this on VHS in I forget why we were even there. We weren't staying there, but it was at like one of those motels, and they had a collection of tapes you could rent as a guest at the hotels, and that's where a motel, and that's where I remember seeing it. And this exact cover too was just crazy. You know, she's got this really crazed look in her eyes, hence the name Demented. And Demented is written in blood across the thing. Of course, the VHS box that I saw was very faded, and she's wielding a meat cleaver. Massive cleavage showing, blood splattered all over it. Looks more like she had an accident with tomato soup. Revenge is sweet and deadly. Demented. Watched it, have it. They released this on Blu-ray, and this company is Scream Factory. They've been doing a really good job of releasing a lot of these classics and stuff like that. And, you know, quite frankly, I don't really recall the film all that much. It's another one of those 80s, you know, because the 80s really dominated the horror market. That was the pure and simple. That was everything during that time. So this is one of the weaker of the two. If you want one of the stronger of these type of films where it's a revenge kind of rape revenge, whatever, you know, kind of thing, Spit on Your Grave. I Spit on Your Grave. It's a very old film. I think it's in the 70s. That one was intense. That one's absolutely crazy. All right. So I'll put that one aside. Okay. So again, like for me growing up, a lot of stuff, one of my favorite things to watch was on TNT Monster Vision, hosted by Joe Bob Briggs. That was one of the things that I grew up watching. That was really cool. That's when I remember seeing this one for the very first time. Let's see if I can get it. Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. A very underrated Wes Craven film. This was 1991 it came out. This has Everett McGill in it. Everett McGill's, to me, one of his better movies. You may know him from like Twin Peaks, Heartbreak Ridge, and Under Siege 2, Dark Territory. But he and Wendy Roby, they both appeared in Twin Peaks, but this is kind of like an extension of them being their sinister characters. This is a great film. It's almost like a slash between Home Alone and just like taking the Boy Scouts handbook of trickery gone rated R. And most crazy like get up by Everett McGill. He's in a full-bodied leather suit. No idea if they bought this thing or they made it, but it is the most elaborate, very strange-looking leather suit that he wears. I mean, we're talking head to toe. Very, very, very weird. All right, so I believe it says here on the back that the makeup effects were done by Greg Nicotero, Howard Berger, and Robert Kurtzman. Now, these Howard Berger, I know for sure, is involved with the Freddy Krueger stuff and going on. You can tell that's my favorite, the slasher bunch and everything. So, but yeah, this one basically, the young boy gets trapped in the house. He's trying to escape. He realizes the young girl that lives there, and then he starts realizing the moral of it is that she's trapped there too, so he's going to get her out. Of course, these two are absolutely bonkers and crazy. Great movie. A lot of cool like hidden walls and trickery and stuff like that going on in it. Really neat movie. I like it a lot. Now, over on the newer side for me, this just came out. This was out of print for a while. You could get it on a DVD, but it was usually going to cost you a fortune. And it's called Alone in the Dark. This one came out in 1982. It's got Donald Pleasence in it, Jack Palance, Martin Landau. It was produced by Robert Shea, New Line Cinema, of course, with this is pre Freddy Krueger, because I believe Nightmare on Elm Street was 1984. Let's see. Let's see here. Yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street was 84. So this New Line Cinema, pre Nightmare on Elm Street. New Line Cinema, by the way, quick trivia, has become known as the house that Freddy built, because Robert Shea darn near put up everything and gambled everything on Nightmare on Elm Street. That could have made or broke the company. So, and of course, we already know what the future lied behold for it. But Alone in the Dark, and there is a remake of this, not to be confused with that. With the remake I did see, and I don't even remember it. Okay, this was one of those that was it did make it to DVD initially, not sure when, but this does exist now as a new release by Scream Factory. Once again, big shout out and kudos to Scream Factory. Basically, it's a bunch of nut guys, nut house people, and they get released, and they're out there. Donald Pleasance plays the doctor, kind of spry, huh? He reprises kind of as a doctor, a psychiatrist, and he's trying to get them all back together and stuff like that. I watched it twice. Let's put it this way: it falls short of the gore aspect for me. And because there's, it's not dealing with just a single murder guy running around with a mask or something like that kind of thing, so it kind of deviates from that. I'm glad that I didn't pay like an abundance amount of money for this, because the collectible, because it became a collectible because of the other edition and before this got released. It's neat. It's one to have for the collection if you're kind of into collecting a lot of the 80s horror films. It is one that stands out, but it is not I could say it wasn't campy enough for me. It wasn't gory enough as far as special effects and everything like that. Although it did have some, but it was it fell a little weak in there. Of course, we got the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and I'll just run through and tell you my favorites. I pretty much like everything right up into Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare. Those are just my favorites personally off the Freddy Krueger collection thing. I hope that they do release this in a better Blu-ray setting, because this is just right now they kind of compiled them onto as many discs as they could. And I hope they get their own separate releasings. Now, speaking of Nightmare on Elm Street, comes Freddy's Nightmares. Yes, Freddy's Nightmares is a TV show spin-off thing that got started long before Tales from the Crypt in the 90s. This is extremely hard to find. I was very lucky to get a hold of these, and they're season 1 and season 2. Yeah. Very interesting. Freddy Krueger is more or less like the Crypt Keeper on it, and the stories. If you're not they're fairly weak compared to if you're like you like the HBO Tales from the Crypts kind of thing. These are a little weaker, but they're kind of neat. They're really neat. You can see it was a very experimental thing for back then, for sure. The other one here up on the list, Phantasm, the entire box set. This one here. Now again, this is the way you do a box set, people. You got some books and everything. Each one of the discs has its own artwork, its own original cover and everything. And then of course they gave you the reverse covers to go back to the old VHS days if you're like me that like that. This sucker went out of print in 24 hours. Don't know why. It is now like $250 or something like that for this. I bought it for $60 at Best Buy. I should have bought 2 if I would have known better. But that thing goes in and out of print all the time. They just released a Blu-ray of part 1 and 2 as a double on one Blu-ray. If you don't have number 2, snag that while you can, because number 2 on this seems to go out of print a lot, and a lot of times that's due to whoever owns the copyright to it, and that's usually what happens. So now number 2 is the fan favorite because it's more of like an action film. It really is the start of where Regman started to become Reggie as we know him in the series, and that's when he also constructs his 4-barreled shotgun. Okay, Here's another set that is old. I've had this forever. This is the Herschel Gordon Lewis box set, if you would. This is the other ones. Of course, the main ones that he did would be like the 2000 Maniacs, Color Me Blood Red, and what's the third one? I don't remember it. Blood Feast. Blood Feast. These came out in the 60s. These were completely shocking at the time. Of course, by today's standards, it's laughable. But this stuff was absolutely shocking at the time, because nobody had ever really seen stuff like this. This was taking things beyond, way beyond what it could have, what most of the stuff was. Herschel Gordon Lewis is also considered a godfather of a lot of this stuff. This is all pre-Italian horror film stuff, Lucio Fulci, stuff like that. Now, this box set has the Gruesome Twosome, which is these two crazy people own a wig shop, but they're not wigs. Guess what? They're scalps from people. Taste the Blood, I believe, is a vampire one. Something weird. I don't even remember it. She Devils on Wheels is a motorcycle gang of women that literally go around and just butcher people. The Wizard of Gore is that's an interesting one. That's a very interesting idea too. That is a magician that does a magic trick and then ends up like he's seeing what's really happening. He's mutilating people, but then they're in like a weird trance after they get let go. They go back to their normal life. They seem like to be like a robot, but then all of a sudden they just die. So it's kind of a strange one. And the Gore Girls is about this guy investigating the murders of some dancers at exotic clubs, and very strange, very strange. Kind of reminds me of like one of Pam Grier's exploitation films. Here is another Nightmare on Elm Street making of DVD that came out. This is the making of part 4, I believe, and I bought this just because it's a very generic DVD. In fact, I don't think it's... Oh yeah, it does actually have a label on it, but it's a very interesting one. It's a documentary by Drew Cummings. Really interesting. If you love the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff, this is kind of cool stuff to get. Another throwback to VHS days would be Popcorn. Popcorn, this was 1991. You can tell the difference between movies like this from the 90s to from the 80s. The 90s, just things were getting a little bit more... It seemed like they were trying to put more effort into it, but they lost that campiness, I think, that of the 80s. But this is one of them. They restart up a theater showing all these old films, all these old creature feature kind of things, and then run around doing like, trying to horse around with the guests and everything like that. Well, meanwhile, what they don't know is there's a guy running around trading faces out. He's making fake faces out of other people, and killing them, making a mold of their face or something like that, and then he's running around killing them. So kind of an interesting, it's campy enough or whatever, but I bought it because it came out. This is Vinegar Syndrome or somebody else. Synopsis Films. These are some that came out that are doing their other things. These are like Vinegar Syndrome would be another company that's doing this. Other than the great big entity of Scream Factory now. Like Vinegar Syndrome did Psycho Cop. There's 2 of these. This is Psycho Cop Returns. This is actually uncut for the first time that we get to see it. Psycho Cop Returns had you can't take this movie seriously. This movie is borderline. It's so bad it's good. I saw it originally on VHS, and even back then it was cut and censored and hacked to pieces. When I heard this came out, I definitely had to grab it. Don't expect 5-star acting at all, but if you're ever in a mood for just laughing, joking, just terrible acting, and just almost a slash sleaze flick, gore flick, you can watch Psycho Cop Returns. This is the second one. You don't really need to see the one or the other to understand it. It's the bad guy's the cop. He's going around killing people, played by Bobby Ray Schaefer, and that's it. I think the first one's worse, if that makes anything better. All right. The Beyond with Lucio Fulci. This is one of the granddaddy of the Italian horror flicks. That's why I brought this one out. There's so many different ones, but The Beyond is the granddaddy of them. Otherwise known as the Seven Doors to Hell or something like that. This is a straight out splatter fest, super gory. Most of the original copies of this were censored, heavily cut down, but this one is intact. It's a new releasing by Grindhouse on Blu-ray in all of its glory and gore, for sure. The Beyond. Zombies, just spiders, all kinds of crazy stuff. Watch The Beyond if you're into that. Halloween 4, I brought this out because this is the very first real one Michael Myers film that kind of frightened me as a kid. I watched it on VHS, rented it from the grocery store. Kind of interesting about this particular one. Everybody knows about part 1, part 2, part 3, and all that. But to me, the trilogy of this cool stuff would be part 4, 5, and 6. Now, here's another weird thing that I kind of discovered, that they have, with the part 4 being The Return of Michael Myers, part 5 being The Revenge of Michael Myers, part 6 being The Curse of Michael Myers. You know what else has those titles? The Pink Panther, which I think started to come out at the same time later on. But anyway, they had like The Return of the Pink Panther, The Revenge of the Pink Panther, The Curse of the Pink Panther. Kind of weird, isn't it? But no, these are definitely one of the stronger of the sequels made. Can't say much for the other ones that were made later, but I did see part 6 in the theater, and I could have sworn that one was called The Origin of Michael Myers when it first hit the theater. When I remember that back then, I could have sworn. Ultimate haunted house stuff got to be Poltergeist. Poltergeist, Steven Spielberg presents it, or production. That's a Tobe Hooper film. Tobe Hooper, director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That is the ultimate haunted house. Of course, the sad story, Heather O'Rourke, but that's awesome. All right, before I leave you, look at this. What in the world? Look at the gloriousness of black and white, and what is that? Relax, there's a beat. But doesn't it look strange and bizarre in black and white? The last one on the list is going to be probably the weirdest film that I've got in the collection. It comes in a set here. I don't remember the other one. The other one's called Satan's Black Wedding. This one that I'm talking about, though, is called Criminally Insane. All right. 250 pounds of maniacal fury. I'm going to read you the back of this just for fun. Tipping the scales at 300 pounds, Ethel Janowski. Crazy fat Ethel has just been released from the mental institution. Ethel is full of repressed rage, but she can't get full no matter how much she eats. When her grandmother locks away the food, Ethel kills the old woman for the keys to the pantry and soon becomes a bloodthirsty, mass-murdering monster that will slaughter anyone who gets in the way of her appetite. But what will Ethel do with the corpses that are piling up? The corpses are piling up in the attic. Also, as a DVD extra, there is Criminally Insane Part 2. Yes, it is exactly what it sounds like. Happy Halloween, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for hanging out. And be safe, and I appreciate you coming around and hanging out.